Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another Read With Me session. I'm yours truly, Isabel Bedell, and I'm here to read with you. And I'm so excited for this particular Read With Me session because it's all about the law of intuition from the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And before I get into it, I want to make sure, okay, that if you believe that you are a very intuitive person, make sure to smash the like button, make sure to hit the subscribe button, because I'm about to intuitive your intuition today, okay? I actually read this chapter this weekend, and I'm like, damn, this guy, he's so freaking good with his words, you know? He like says what you're thinking, and he simplifies the overcomplicated stuff when it comes to business, when it comes to communication, when it comes to leadership, when it comes to life. Okay, so shout out to you, John C. Maxwell, Johnny Pooh. You are awesome. And I really appreciate you creating this amazing chapter. So without further ado, let's get into it. One, because I've been doing this for the past couple chapters, I'm gonna read something from the previous chapter so we can get into this one, okay? I really enjoyed the last chapter. It's called The Law of Respect. And the Law of Respect is all about you're able to only follow leaders that are on a higher leadership level than you. One of my favorite graphics shared in this book was this. So you got to get the physical book so you can take advantage of these amazing diagrams that he has in this book. It's basically showing when leaders decide to go on their own, first, the group has to figure out where they're at, okay? Sometimes the twos, the ones, the threes, they don't know what's going on, so they just stay in place. But then he shows that the sevens, the fives, the nines, the eights, they're the ones that are looking for direction. They're like laser beams, just going all over the place. But the 10, which is the ultimate, the leader or whatever, he or she is actually like just focused on one direction, one goal, one path, okay? Then the next diagram shows, and as soon as people change direction to follow the strongest leaders, that is where the direction starts leading in the right direction, because the leader has proven to stay put, stay focused, keep in one direction. Therefore, the sevens, the fives, the fours, even the nines, they're like, ooh, that person right there is strong. I can go in that direction too. I trust what they're talking about. I trust what they're saying. I understand what they're saying. I'm going to go with what they're saying. That's what basically is happening. And when that is taken care of, the reason is simple. People naturally follow leaders stronger than themselves. So I really enjoyed this Law of Respect chapter because it actually spoke about Michael Jordan and how he chose Phil Jackson as his coach. Pretty much Michael chose him versus the other way around. Typically coaches are, recruiting champions, but Michael was trained very well by his previous coach, Dean Smith, and then he was able to learn the foundation. Strong pillars of leadership were built within Michael, and then he was able to then go from Dean Smith, the principles that Dean Smith taught him, and then was like, I'm going to stick with the best of the best, and I'm going to actually go towards Phil Jackson because I believe he's the leader here in this space. And that's exactly what he did. So with the law of intuition, okay, just a forewarning, if you feel like you are an intuitive person, if you feel like you can feel things outside of the realm of physical and what your eyes can see, this particular chapter is going to make so much more sense. Okay. It sure did too, because I honestly feel like I'm extremely intuitive, and sometimes I'm more intuitive in some areas of my life than others. And sometimes it's hard for me to listen to that little voice because it might stop me from actually pursuing something that I feel like I shouldn't be doing. And then when I do it, and it goes against that little voice, ooh, I know it in my deepest parts of me, that little voice was always right. So let's get into it. The Law of Intuition is chapter 8, but from the 21 Laws of Leadership by John C. Maxwell. Let's get into it. Make sure to hit the like, make sure to hit subscribe. And if you are new to this channel, congratulations. I'm so happy that you are here. I am so grateful that you are investing into your life, into your education, and you're filling your cup first. Let's get into it. Leaders evaluate everything with a leadership bias. During the decade that I've spoken to audiences about the 21 laws of leadership, I found that the law of intuition is the most difficult to teach. And when I talk about it, natural leaders they get it. They get it instantly. Natural leaders. They learned leadership. The learned leaders get it eventually, and the non-leaders just look at me blankly. Leaders look at things differently than others do. They evaluate everything according to the leadership bias. They possess leadership intuition that informs everything they do. It is an inseparable part of who they are. Now, everybody is intuitive here. Check this out. Not all people are intuitive in the area of leadership, but every person possesses intuition. Why do I say that? Well, because people are intuitive in their area of strength. So I'll give you an example. Because I'm a communicator and I do a lot of public speaking, people occasionally want to hear from my wife, Margaret, and she received an invitation to speak at an event. So as the date approaches, Margaret works on her presentation, puts together her notes, and we inevitably end up having a conversation something like this. John, how do you think I should start? She asks. And John answers, it depends. Well, that's not much help. And then John's like, well, Margaret, I'm not trying to be difficult. Every speaking situation is different. And then she's like, okay, but what do you do? And then John's like, well, I go out and talk to the attendees before the event, try to get a feel for who they are, just to check around the room. And I listen to what the host said and to the people who spoke before me to get an idea if I should play off something they said or that happened earlier. And I'd find a way to really connect with the audience. And then she's like, super frustrated. She's like, that doesn't help me. And then she's like, well, to be honest, her questions frustrate me as much as my answers frustrate her. And I have had the hardest time explaining what I do because communication is intuitive for me. And it's one of my greatest strengths. And this is where the tables turn. Listen here, y'all. John, he's not picking on Margaret. That's the love of his life. She is more highly talented than I am in so many areas. And to give you an idea, I'm getting ready to speak at an event. I'm trying to pick up my clothes and I'm worthless. One of the two things usually happens. I sat in front of my closet, paralyzed and drooling, totally incapable of figuring out what goes together. Or I pick something out, put it on, go to the bedroom, and Margaret says like, John, you're not going to wear that, are you? And he's like, No, of course not. What do you think I should wear? And then Margaret strolls into the closet, looks around for about 2 seconds, and then she's like, you know what? I haven't seen you wear this jacket, so how about this? She says as she starts grabbing things, putting things together, and if you wear this shirt and this tie, it will really pop. And she picks out the slacks, and I try to be helpful and pick out the shoes, and she's like, no, those are not the shoes that go with this. Here, wear these and with this belt. And then when I'm at the event, I hear compliments of how I'm dressed. So when I return home, I hang the whole entire outfit just like it is. And I put it back into the closet the way I wore it, because I know it all goes together piece by piece. And then the next time I get ready to leave for a speaking engagement, put it all on and walk confidently into the bedroom. And Margaret says, you can't wear that again, silly. And off we go through the whole routine again. Margaret has an incredible instinct when it comes to anything artistic. She has a great sense of style and a fantastic eye for color. She can paint, arrange flowers, design, hunt down fine antiques, gardens, decorate, you name it. She's intuitive in the areas, and that is her strength. And thanks to her, our homes have always been gorgeous. She could easily hold her own against any decorator on HGTV, and I'm lucky because I benefit from her talents. Here we go, more than facts. Intuition is so difficult to explain because it's not concrete. It doesn't rely on just empirical evidence. If you've ever seen reruns of the old show Dragnet on TV Land, you probably know that the phrase Jack Webb made famous was just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. The law of intuition depends on so much more than just the facts. The law of intuition is based on facts plus instinct, plus other intangible factors such as employee morale, organizational momentum, and the relational dynamics. Colin Powell, retired Army general and former Secretary of State, provides a good explanation of the use of leadership intuition and its importance. He observes that many leaders have trouble if their desire to have exhaustive amount of data or wait to have all their questions answered before making decisions. Powell says that his practice is to make a leadership decision after gathering only 40 to 60% of the information that can be obtained. And then he uses his experience to make up the difference. And in other words, he bases his leadership decision as much as on intuition as on facts. He relies on the law of intuition, and that often separates the great leaders from the merely good ones. I love that. Who in here gathers about 40 to 60% of something and is able to make a decision right on the spot? Or are you the type of leader that requires, spreadsheets and a lot of data and, past and future and, projections and backtracks and all this stuff? And like, you need to get to at least 80% to make a decision. Ask yourself these questions, and you will know if the law of intuition is on your side. Leadership is their bias. Good leaders see everything with a leadership bias, and as a result, they instinctively, almost automatically, know what to do when it comes to leading. The read and react instinct is evident in the best leaders. So, for example, consider the career of another former U.S. Army General, H. Norman Schwarzkopf. Time after time, he assigned commands that others avoided, but he was able to turn the situations around. And as a result of his exceptional leadership intuition and ability to act, leaders are often able to do similar things. And when Schwarzkopf had been in the Army 17 years, he finally got his chance to command a battalion. It occurred in 1969 during his second tour of Vietnam as Lieutenant Colonel. The command, which nobody wanted, was of the 1st Battalion of the 6th Infantry. The first of the 6th. But because the group had such a horrible reputation, it was nicknamed the worst of the six. And confirming this was the fact that he took command and he was told that the battalion had just flunked its annual inspection with the abysmal score. Only 16 out of a possible 100 points. He had only 30 days to whip his men into shape. Wow. Seen through a leadership lens. After the change in command ceremony, Schwarzkopf met the outgoing commander. And before the man left, he told Schwarzkopf, "This is for you." Handing him a bottle of scotch, "You're gonna need it." Well, I hope you did better than I did. And I tried to lead as best as I could, but this is a lousy battalion. It's got lousy morale. It's got lousy mission. Good luck to you. Schwarzkopf anticipated a terrible situation, but it was even worse than he expected. His predecessors hadn't known the first thing about leadership. The man had never ventured outside the safety of the base camp to inspect his troops. And the results were appalling. The entire battalion was in chaos, the officers were indifferent, and the most basic military security procedures weren't even being followed, and the soldiers were dying needlessly. The departing commander was right. It was a lousy battalion with a lousy morale, but he didn't realize that it was largely his fault. And during the next few weeks, Schwarzkopf's leadership intuition kicked in and he took action. He implemented procedures, retrained the troops, developed his leaders, and gave the men direction and sense of purpose. When it was time for the 30-day inspection, they achieved a passing score. And the men started to think of themselves, hey, we can do it, right? We can be a success. And, we're not the worst of the sixth anymore. And as a result, fewer men died, morale rose, and the battalion started to become effective in its mission. The battalion turnaround was so strong that just a few months after Schwarzkopf took over, it was selected to perform the more difficult missions, the kind that could be carried out only by a disciplined, well-led group with strong morale. Who you are determines what you see. How was Schwarzkopf able to turn around his group of leaders, of soldiers? The same way he overcame difficult assignments again and again, the law of intuition. Other officers had the same training and access to some of the resources, and Schwarzkopf wasn't necessarily smarter than his counterparts either. What he brought to the table was strong leadership intuition. He saw everything with a leadership bias. Who are you? Who you are dictates what you see. Who you are dictates what you see. A scene from the movie The Great Outdoors illustrates this perfectly. In the movie, Chet, played by John Candy, is vacationing with his family at a small lake community in the woods. He is unexpectedly visited by his sister-in-law and her husband, Roman, played by Dan. As the two men sit on the porch of their cabin overlooking the lake and miles of beautiful forest, they start to talk. And Roman, a fast-talking wheeler dealer, shares his vision with Chet. I'll tell you what I see when I look out there. I see the underdeveloped resources of northern Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. I see a syndicated development consortium exploiting over $1.5 billion in forest products. And I see a paper mill. And if the strategic metals are there, a mining operation in Greenville between the condos on the lake in a waste management facility. Now, I ask you, what do you see? I just see trees, answered Chet. Well, says Roman, nobody ever accused you of having a grand vision. Chet saw trees because he was there to enjoy the scenery. Roman saw business opportunities because he was someone whose desire was to make more money. How you see the world around you is determined by who you are. How you see the world around you is determined by who you are. How leaders think. because of their intuition. Okay.
Because of their intuition. Leaders evaluate everything with a leadership bias. People born with natural leadership abilities are especially strong in the area of leadership intuition, and others have to work hard to develop and hone it. But either way, intuition comes from two things: the combination of natural ability, which comes in a person's area of strength, and learned skill. It is an informed intuition, and it causes leadership issues to jump out to a leader in a way that they don't with others. I regard leadership intuition as the ability of a leader to read what's going on. And for that reason, I say that leaders are readers. That's right, leaders are readers. Leaders are readers of their situation. Today, I wear many hats. I write, speak, mentor, and network. I also own 2 companies. Although I speak with the presidents of my companies on a weekly basis, they run the day-to-day operations, and I go to the office only occasionally. Recently, John Hull, the president and CEO of Equip, commented, "John, when you come into the office, you re-enter our world very easily." I thought that was an interesting choice of words, so I asked what he meant. He says, "You are very aware of the atmosphere and environment," he explained. "You ask good questions and quickly fall in step with us on our journey. It's never awkward when you return to the office." And as I reflected, I realized what he was describing was my use of leadership intuition. In all kinds of circumstances, leaders pick up on details that might elude others. They tune in to leadership dynamics. Many leaders describe this as an ability to smell things in their organization, and they can sense people's attitudes. They are able to detect the chemistry of a team. They can tell when things are humming and when things are winding down or getting ready to grind to a halt. They don't need to sift through stats, read reports, or examine a balance sheet. They know the situation before they have all the facts, and that is the result of their leadership intuition. They know the situation before they have all the facts, and that is the result of their leadership intuition. Leaders are readers of trends. Most followers are focused on their current work. They think in terms of tasks at hand, projects, or specific goals. That is as it should be. Most managers are concerned with efficiency and effectiveness. They often possess a broader view than employees, thinking in terms of weeks, months, or even years. But leaders take an even broader view. They look years, even decades ahead. Everything that happens around us does so in the context of a bigger picture. Leaders have the ability and responsibility to step back from what's happening at the moment and to discern not only where the organization has been, but also where it's headed. And sometimes they can accomplish this through analysis, but often the best leaders, they sense it first and find data to explain it later. Sometimes they can accomplish this through analysis, but often the best leaders sense it first and find data to explain it later. Their intuition tells them that something is happening and the conditions are changing and that trouble or opportunity is coming. Leaders must always be a few steps ahead of their best people, or they're not really leading. They can do that only if they are able to read trends. Leaders are readers of their resources. A major difference between leaders and everyone else is the way they see resources. A good worker encounters a challenge and thinks, "What can I do to help?" A high achiever asks, "How can I solve this problem?" A peak performer wonders, "What must I do to reach the next level so that I can overcome this?" You see, leaders think differently. They think in terms of resources and how to maximize them. They see a challenge, a problem, or opportunity, and they think, who is the best person to take this on? What resources, raw materials, technology, information, and so forth, do we possess that will help us? What will this take financially? And how can I encourage my team to achieve this success? Beautiful. Leaders see everything with a leadership bias. Their focus is on mobilizing people and leveraging resources to achieve their goals rather than on using their own individual efforts. Damn, that's strong. Their focus is on mobilizing people and leveraging resources to achieve their goals rather than using their own individual efforts. Leaders who want to succeed maximize every asset and resource that they have for the benefit of the organization. And for that reason, they are continually aware of what they have at their disposal. Leaders are readers of people. President Lyndon Johnson once said that when you walk into a room, you don't belong in politics if you can't tell who's for you and who's against you. The statement also applies to any other kind of leader. Intuition helps leaders sense what's happening among people and know their hopes, fears, and concerns. They can sense what's happening in a room, whether there's curiosity, doubt, reluctance, anticipation, or relief. Reading people is perhaps the most important intuitive leader skill, the most important intuitive skill leaders can possess. And after all, if what you are doing doesn't involve people, it's not leadership. And if you aren't persuading people to follow, you aren't leading. Leaders are readers of themselves. Finally, good leaders develop the ability to read themselves. Poet James Russell Lowell observed, no one can produce great things who is not thoroughly sincere in dealing with himself. Leaders must know not only their strengths, blind spots, skills, and weaknesses, but also their current state of mind. Why? Because leaders can hinder progress just as easily as they can help create it. And in fact, it's easier to damage an organization than it is to build one. We've all seen excellent organizations that took generations to build begin falling apart in a matter of years. When leaders become self-centered, pessimistic, or rigid in their thinking, they often hurt their organizations because they are likely to fall into the trap of thinking they cannot or should not change. And once that happens, the organization has a hard time becoming better. Its decline is inevitable. Three levels of leadership intuition. If you're saying to yourself, ooh, I'd like to be able to read these dynamics in my organization, but I just don't see things intuitively, don't despair. The good news is that you can improve your leadership intuition even if you are not a natural born leader. And as I've already mentioned, leadership intuition is informed intuition. The less natural leadership talent that you have, the more you will need to make up for it by developing skills and gaining experience. They can help you develop thinking patterns, and thinking patterns can be learned. I found that all people fit into these three major intuitive levels. Number one, the first level is those who naturally understand leadership. Some people are born with exceptional leadership skills and gifts. They intuitively understand people and know how to move them from point A to point B. And even when they're kids, they act as leaders. Watch them on the playground, and you can see other kids following them. People with natural leadership intuition can build upon it and become world-class leaders of their highest caliber. Number two, those who can be nurtured to understand leadership. Most people fall into this category, and they have adequate people skills. And if they are teachable, they can develop intuition, and leadership can be learned. However, people who don't try to improve their leadership and never work to develop their intuitive are condemned to being blindsided in their leadership for the rest of their lives. And here's number 3, those who will never understand leadership. I believe nearly everyone is capable of developing leadership skills and intuition, but occasionally I run across someone who doesn't have a leadership bone in his body and has absolutely no interest in developing the skill necessary to lead. And this isn't you, because these people never pick up a leadership book. Yes. Developing intuition by changing your thinking. Several years ago, I gained insight into college football and about how quarterbacks are trained to think. When I was invited to the University of Southern California, their coach at the time was Larry Smith. He asked me to speak to the Trojans football team before a big game, and also allowed me to visit the team's offensive war room. On chalkboards covering every wall, the coaches had mapped out every possible situation their team could be in, and according to down, yardage, and place on the field. And for every situation, the coach had planned a specific play designed to succeed based on their years of experience and their intuitive knowledge of the game. While I was there, I noticed a cut against one of the walls. And when I asked what it was for, the offensive coordinator said, "I always spend Friday night here to make sure that I always know all the plays too." Yeah, but you've got all of them written down on the sheet that you'll carry with you tomorrow on the sidelines. I said, "Why don't you just use that?" And he said, "I can't rely on that. There isn't time. You see, by the time the ball carrier's knee touches the ground, I have to know what play to call next based on the situation. And there's no time to fumble around deciding what to do." It was his job to put the coaching staff's intuition into action in an instant. But the coaches didn't stop there. The 3 USC quarterbacks had to memorize every one of those plays the night before the game. I watched as the coaches grilled those young men, firing one situation after another. The job of the quarterbacks was to recite which play was right for the situation. The coaches wanted those plays to be so well informed, so ready, that their intuition would take over during crunch time. It would help them to effectively lead the team. Leaders solve problems using the law of intuition. Whenever leaders face a problem, they automatically measure it and begin solving it. Using the law of intuition, they evaluate everything with a leadership bias. And for example, leadership intuition come into play in recent years at Apple Computer. Just about everybody knows the success story of Apple. The company was created in 1976 by Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak in a garage. Just 4 years later, the business went public, opening at $22 a share and selling 4.6 million shares. It made more than 40 employees and investors millionaires overnight. But Apple's story hasn't all been positive. And since those early years, Apple's success, stock value, and ability to capture customers have fluctuated wildly. Jobs left Apple in 1985, having been pushed out in a battle with CEO John Sculley, the former Pepsi president with Jobs had recruited in 1983. Sculley was followed by Michael Spindler in 1993, and then Gilbert Amelio in 1996. None of them was able to reestablish Apple's previous success. In its glory days, Apple had sold 14.6% of all personal computers in the United States. By 1997, sales were down to 3.5%. That was when Apple again looked at the leadership of its original founder, Steve Jobs, for help. The failing company believed he could save it, reinventing Apple. Jobs intuitively reviewed the situation and immediately took action. He knew the improvement was impossible without a change in leadership, so he quickly dismissed all but 2 of the previous board members and installed new ones. He made changes in the executive leadership, and he fired the company's ad agency and held a competition for the account among 3 firms. He also refocused the company. Jobs wanted to get back to the basics of what Apple had always done best: use its individuality to create products that made a difference. At the time, Jobs said, "We've reviewed the roadmap of new products and axed more than 70% of the projects, keeping 30% that were gems. Plus, we're adding new ones that are a whole new paradigm of looking at computers." None of these actions was especially surprising, but Jobs also did something that really showed the law of intuition in action. He read Apple's situation and made a leadership decision that went absolutely against the grain of Apple's previous thinking. It was an incredible intuition leadership leap. Jobs created a strategic alliance with the man whom Apple employees considered to be their arch enemy, Bill Gates. Jobs explained, "I called Bill and said Microsoft and Apple should work more closely together, but we have this issue to resolve, this intellectual property dispute. Let's resolve it." They negotiated a deal quickly, which settled Apple's lawsuit against Microsoft. Gates promised to pay off Apple and invest $150 million in non-voting stock. That cleared the way for future partnership and brought much needed capital to the company. It was something only an intuitive leader would have done. Apple's stock value immediately went up 33%, and in time, Apple regained some of the prestige it had lost over the years. Revolutionizing music. In 2001, Jobs made another leadership move based on intuition. While other computers manufacturers were pursuing PDAs, he was looking at music. And when an independent contractor and hardware expert named Tony Fadell approached Apple with an idea for an MP3 player in a music sales company, Apple embraced it. Even though several other companies had rejected it, Fadell was hired on, and they began working on what would be eventually called the iPod. Jobs' involvement with the iPod is an indication of his leadership intuition. Ben Nas, who was on the inside of the project, says, "Interesting thing about the iPod is that since it started, it had 100% of Steve Jobs' time. Not many projects get that. He was heavily involved in every single aspect of the project. And why did Jobs do that? Because his intuition as a leader made him understand the impact that the device could make. It was consistent with his vision for creating a digital lifestyle." Jobs had been right on. Sales have been phenomenal and have exceeded the company's computer sales. Apple was making a profit while other technology companies suffered. By spring of 2002, Apple had shipped more than 10 million units, and by the end of 2005, Apple possessed 75% of the world's market for digital music players. Jobs' story is a reminder that leadership is really more an art than science. The principles of leadership are constant, but the application changes with every leader in every situation, and that's why it requires intuition. Without it, leaders get blindsided. And that's one of the worst things that can happen to a leader. If you want to lead long, lead well, and stay ahead of others, you've got to obey the law of intuition. This is how you can apply the law of intuition to your life. How are you when it comes to trusting your intuition? Are you a facts or feelings person? To become better at the law of intuition, you must first be willing to trust your intuition. Begin by working with your areas of your greatest strengths. So first, determine which is your strongest natural talent. Then second, participate in that talent, paying attention to your feelings, instincts, and intuition. When do you know something is right before you have evidence? How can you tell when you're on? Do your instincts in this area ever betray you? And if so, when and why? Get to know your aptitude for intuition, where you are strong, before trying to develop it into leadership. Number 2, one of the most important abilities in leadership is reading people. How would you rate yourself in this area? Can you tell what others are feeling? Can you sense when people are upset, happy, confused, angry? Do you anticipate what others are thinking? If this is not an area of strength for you, then work on improving by doing these things. Read books on relationships, engage more people in conversation, become a people watcher. 3, train yourself to think in terms of mobilizing people and harnessing resources. Think about current projects or goals, and now imagine how you can accomplish them without doing any of the work yourself except for recruiting, empowering, and motivating others. You may even want to write the following on a note card and keep it in your pocket organizer. Who is the best person to take this on? What resources do we possess that can help us? What will this take financially? And how can I encourage my team to achieve success? These are the 4 questions to ask yourself to become a more effective leader. And that concludes the law of intuition, y'all. What an amazing chapter. Again, if you feel like you are an intuitive leader, make sure to comment below, I am intuitive. Or share an experience that you've had. I would love to know. I love this chapter, and I really enjoy understanding more of these laws, because I wondered how will I be able to understand all these laws? There's 21 of them. How can I keep them with me? And I feel like the more that I dig deeper and the more that I understand more about myself and how I can actually use these laws, I'm like, oh, yeah, that is the law of respect. That is the law of the lid. That is the law of navigation. This is the law of intuition. Improvement is impossible without change. And whenever leaders face a problem, they automatically measure it and begin solving it using the law of intuition. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. I'll see you in the next video where we cover the next chapter of the law of magnetism. I'm really excited about that one too. Talk to you soon. Have a blessed day. Ciao.